Hello everyone, how's it going? My name is Dan the Tutor. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the quadratic formula, which is one of the scariest things in all of algebra. Now, don't be afraid, because it's really not that bad. It just takes a little bit of time to memorize. And once you have it memorized, you're basically going to be using it for the rest of your math careers. So until senior year of high school, in the very least, that's how long you want to memorize this formula for. And so here is the quadratic formula. X equals big fraction bar, like probably the biggest fraction bar you've ever drawn in your life, of negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And this is probably the most famous equation from algebra. Now there's a couple things we need to discuss. First, what the heck do a, b, and c mean? Second, when can I use this equation? And third, what's the solution to this equation? Like, what am I finding here? So I will answer all of those questions right now. First of all, it's called the quadratic formula for a reason. I don't know if you know this, but quadratics in math are in the following format: ax squared plus bx plus c. The key here is recognizing that it's x squared. X squared is a parabola in math, and it also just happens to be the definition of a quadratic. So even if you don't know what quadratic means, it means x squared, and now you know. So for instance, if I have 4x squared minus 2x plus 11, then that means a is going to be 4, b is going to be negative 2, and c is going to be 11, and then I just plug in these three numbers into the formula above. And by the way, a lot of my students, especially the first time, they'll say a is 4x squared and b is negative 2x. No. Do not include the x's in the quadratic formula. Do not. So that answers the question of what's a, b, and c. Now the next question, when do I use this formula? There's two reasons why you would use it. Number one, your teacher's a big fat meanie, and she's asking you, find the solutions using the quadratic formula. So that's the first case. Pretty obvious. The second case where you're going to use this is where you don't know how to factor the equation. So for instance, if I give you x squared plus 2x plus 12, and I ask you to factor this, good luck trying to factor this using traditional methods. You are not going to be able to. This is not factorable. And whenever it can't be factored, that's when we also use the quadratic formula. So that's when we use the quadratic formula. Now the final question. We use the quadratic formula, great. What did we find? We use the quadratic formula to find the solutions to the equation. Solutions have a lot of different names in math. They can be called solutions, they can be called zeros, they can be called x-intercepts, they can be called factors, they can be called roots, and that's about it. But if the question asks you to find any of these 5 words, you know that there's a good chance that we'll need quadratic formula, especially if it's too hard to factor. So now let's look at a few examples of how we use the quadratic formula, and then I'll let you go on your own to be adventurous and try it on your own. So for the first one, I have x squared plus x minus 2, and I want to use the quadratic formula. Now first of all, I do want to mention this can be factored. This would factor to x plus 2 times x minus 1. In other words, we get the solutions x equals negative 2 and positive 1. But if you don't know how to do that, then you need to watch another video on just basic factoring skills, because I'm not even going to be talking about this for this video. So solving this without factoring, but by using the quadratic formula, I first have to identify what a, b, and c are. So you may notice there's nothing next to x squared. There's no numbers there. So how can I know what a is? Remember, there's always an invisible 1 if there's nothing there. So that means a is 1. Same story for b. B also has an invisible 1 in front, so that's 1. And finally, c will be negative 2. And now we're going to plug in the formula. And before I write it down, I'm going to do this once and only once and never again. I'm going to give you the same annoying song that my teacher taught me back in like 7th grade of how to remember the quadratic formula. And it goes something like this. X equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And that's it. I know my singing is terrible. That's why I'm a tutor and not anything related to music. But now I just plug in the formula and we're good to go. So it's going to be -1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times 1 times -2 all over 2 times 1. Now my advice to you is don't do this all at once. Do this one part at a time, starting with the square root, because that's the hardest part. So first I'm rewriting this stuff, then plus or minus square root of 1 squared is just 1, minus 4 times 1 times -2. That's actually +8 because it's a double negative, and then denominator is just 2. So then that means in the numerator I have -1 plus or minus square root of 1 plus 8, 9 divided by 2. And I know the square root. Square root of 9 is 3. If I did not know the square root of 9, like let's say it's a harder number, like square root of 15 or something, then I would just leave it as square root of 15. If your teacher wants a decimal, then fine, plug it in a calculator. But if we just want the normal answer, keep it as root 15 and that's fine. So in other words, it's going to be x equals -1 plus or minus 3, because that's the square root of 9, divided by 2. Now watch what I do next. I am not adding or subtracting the -1 and the 3. That would be illegal. I can't do it. What I'm going to do instead is I am going to split up the plus or minus into 2 different equations. So for instance, -1 plus 3 over 2, and then x equals -1 minus 3 over 2. This is what we have to do. This is a crucial step. And now I just solve both of these one at a time. So for the left one, -1 plus 3 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. And that's one of my answers. Then for the other one, it's x equals -1 minus 3, so -4 divided by 2. That's going to give me x equals -2. And bam, there's my 2 solutions. I'm happy. I just used the quadratic formula. And honestly, it wasn't that bad. But of course, the next couple problems we're going to do today will be worse. And so here's the next one. I encourage you to try this one on your own. It is 3x squared minus 6x plus 3. So go ahead, try this on your own now. If you get stuck, unpause the video and see how I do it. So here's what we're going to say. First, a is 3, b is -6, and c is also +3. Now I just plug it in the formula. X equals -b, so that's double -6. In other words, +6. And yes, that matters. It is now +6. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, so -6 squared, minus 4a is 3, and c is also 3, divided by 2a, so 2 times 3. So I'm going to start reducing, starting with the stuff inside the square root. So -6 squared is +36. It's positive because a negative number squared is positive. And if you plugged it in your calculator and you got -36, it's probably because you didn't put the -6 in parentheses, and that's why you got the wrong answer. So there you go. And then -4 times 3 times 3, that is going to be -36. And in the denominator, 2 times 3 is just 6. So now reducing from here, I see 36 minus 36. That's just going to be 0. So x equals 6 plus or minus root 0 divided by 6. That 0 part's just going to go away entirely. And it looks like I just get one answer, 6 divided by 6, which is 1. And 1 is my only solution. In other words, I didn't have to split it up into plus or minus because, I mean, look at this. 6 plus 0 over 6 and 6 minus 0 over 6. That's the exact same thing. So it doesn't matter. I get 1 either way. And that's the answer. And now for the last one we're going to do today. It's -2x squared plus 5x minus 9. So go ahead, give it a try yourself, but stop when you get to the square root part and you get a number for the square root part, because then I have something to say at that point. So a is going to be -2, b is +5, and c is -9. So then that means I'm going to do x equals -5 plus or minus the square root of 5 squared minus 4 times -2 times -9. That is not fun. It's 3 negatives. We'll deal with it in a minute. And then divided by 2 times -2. So if I do the part in the square root, it's going to be square root of 25 minus Negative 4 times negative 2 times negative 9, if you plug that correctly in your calculator, you will get minus 72. It's a triple negative, so it stays negative. And then denominator is 2 times negative 2, so negative 4. And then what I say is 25 minus 72, that is going to be square root of negative 47 divided by negative 4. And as soon as you see a negative square root, you say no solution. Because technically what's going on here is you're going to have imaginary solutions, which we can talk about in a separate video at some point. But for right now, if you have a negative square root, the answer is no solution. Circle it, you're done. If you want imaginary answers, well then I'll just tell you that's going to turn into root 47i, but I'm not going any further than that because that's beyond the scope of this video. So that's it for my notes on the quadratic formula. If you have any questions, please post in the comments. Thank you all for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye.